So over the holiday week, happened the day before the 4th of July. We talked about it on the show yesterday. A 13-year-old named Jada was shot and killed while at the mall, the Alderwood Mall in Lynnwood with friends. What we know about this is still coming into focus. There were two groups of young men at the mall that got into a verbal altercation. One of them, a 16-year-old, allegedly pulled out a gun. All happened really quickly. Fired the gun, ended up hitting and killing 13-year-old Jada Woods Johnson, who was doing nothing wrong, wasn't involved in this whatsoever, and has now lost her life doing something that every teenage girl in this country does, go to the mall with her friends. Just horrible stuff. But now, there's been a lot of frustrations in the days after the fact about what the justice system does and does not do with juvenile offenders. I mean, this 16-year-old was out like that. $500,000 bail for someone who brought a gun to a mall and killed an innocent girl is just insane. Before the family even had time to realize what happened, he was back home with his family. Just horrible stuff. But there was also, and continues to be, another challenge behind the scenes that is true with all juvenile offenders in the state of Washington. It is nearly impossible for police to interview them. So there's still so much confusion around what happened at Alderwood Mall that the police in Lynnwood are trying to sort through. What was the dispute about? We don't know for sure whether they've recovered the handgun that was used. They're being a little bit coy about that. And so there's some information that they need to help keep the public safe and to try to help make sure that there's no one else who needs to be arrested. Right now, there's just one 16-year-old who's been arrested, but this was a fight between two groups. So are there other individuals who are culpable? But here's the thing. Remember in 2021, when we were coming off this year of social justice and racial justice reckoning and George Floyd, the legislature in Olympia, they passed all these anti-police bills. The pursuit bill got a lot of attention, but another thing that happened that year in that package was they passed a bill that said you cannot interview juvenile offenders. I just pulled up an old article from the Yakima Herald. New Washington law requires kids to talk to attorneys before police can question them. So this is anyone under the age of 18. It's not enough to just say, okay, you have your Miranda rights and you can request an attorney be present. This tells police you cannot interview. You cannot interview a juvenile offender, no matter how serious the crime, until they have spoken to an attorney, and you have to go out and make sure that they have an attorney. So they can't even waive, even a 17-year-old who's committed a very serious adult level crime, they can't even knowingly waive their right to have an attorney present to be able to talk to law enforcement. So the Lynnwood Police Chief, Cole Langdon, joined us to talk about the real frustrations over that particular law and the impact it's having on their ability to solve crimes and investigate crimes involving juvenile offenders, but also some frustrating details of this case.
We're trying to look into all the facts and what led up to this encounter that ultimately brought a firearm out and led to the loss of a beautiful young girl's life. And so there's some more information. We're trying to get the full story here. But again, when we're talking about dealing with juvenile suspects, we're unable to interview them. So once they're placed into custody, we are not able to, by law, interview them any further. And people might say, well, of course you can. Well, no, you have to actually reach out to their attorney, or you have to obtain an attorney for them. The attorney then at that point would, as any attorney would say, you can no longer speak with them. But a lot of this information, trying to figure out what led up to this, where key items of evidence might be, all the events, just really trying to build the story so we can better understand this. We're really cut off from being able to do that.
Talk specifically about, how that has changed. You've been with Lynnwood PD, you were telling me, for almost 3 decades. So how has that changed when interviewing juvenile offenders, from when you started in your career to now?
Sure. I mean, we've always, been required to advise people of their rights if they are in custody for a suspected crime. They are not free to leave, or they feel as though they might not be free to leave. We are on the side of caution of advising them of their rights. With juveniles, we'll go further. We'll advise them that there are additional juvenile warnings that we used to be able to give to just let them know and kind of further clarify what was at stake potentially with them answering questions as they spoke with the police. We are very careful. We're very mindful of that. And our argument would be that rather than having this legislation, we continue to allow the courts to be the appropriate venue to determine whether statements should be allowed or admissible in court or not. And so it's been a bit of a change where, let's say you had a case where you have an outstanding firearm, you have an outstanding weapon, where there's a real public safety interest. Our ability to interview on that and to gather that information, that would not meet the threshold. There are some thresholds within the law that allow for a potential active shooter or an event that might break out. I mean, we're talking real extreme sets of circumstances where there's an imminent threat to the community where something is about to take place. We can then dive in and begin questioning. But let's say you have something where you can't find that firearm, you can't find a knife, and it might be out in the community somewhere. Maybe it's been thrown into a park. Maybe it's been thrown into a garbage can where it could be found by somebody else. We're not able to ask questions or determine where those items are. So you start talking about common sense, how those get suppressed when they get into court later on. And the courts have the ability to suppress certain statements and allow other statements in. And it's a fairly nuanced dance that's played by the prosecutors, by defense attorneys, and all audited by the courts, by the judges. So this new process has now been pushed down to out into the field, where we're having to navigate this. And really, what it has resulted in is an inability to question juveniles. And so the problem I have is that there are times where juveniles are doing very adult type crimes that are very, very dangerous. And to not have the ability to do that, to look into some of these things and to dig further so that we can really understand what's going on, what happened, and determine if there are any future threats to the community or any present threats to the community. We've largely been stifled in our ability to do that.
Yeah, you pointed out exactly what I would point out is like, okay, I get it. And I think there's some arguments to be made about, as you said before, you guys used to also still go above and beyond your Miranda rights when it comes to juveniles to make sure that they understood fully what was going on. But you're committing adult-sized crimes and you're not getting adult treatment. And, that is something that I think we need to have a conversation about. So there's also this issue of bail that came up. I know that they're separate. I know that you're not the judge, jury, and executioner at the police department, but you've been doing this for 30 years. Is $500,000 bail, do you believe, appropriate in a case with these circumstances?
How bail is set, I'm really going to defer back to the judges on that. I mean, the $500,000 bail, I think it's surprising that somebody could come up with that amount right away. So I think what likely would be a reasonable bail amount for a horrific crime. I'm not in any way minimizing the crime. I would defer back to the judge on that, because they are supposed to take into account all the risk factors and the likelihood of this person further offending and or showing up to court. And so the information that was presented to them at that time, the judge made the call that they made. We were surprised that they were able to come up with that bail amount fairly quickly. And that just is what it is. So,
I mean, Jada's family's pretty pissed off about it. Do you blame them?
They are devastated. And I met with them earlier today, and the way our systems are set up, there is nothing out there within our criminal justice system that will fill the void that's left by their beautiful daughter being taken away from them, who did absolutely nothing wrong. And I think many people who work in the criminal justice system know that it's not a perfect system. It's going to fall short in providing that true justice. And so, yeah, I'm hoping that they can temper their expectations, and I'm hoping that they are sealing themselves for what's in front of them as they go through this, and they try to make sense of what happened with their daughter, who again was doing nothing wrong, not engaged in high risk behavior, just being a young kid enjoying the ball, and what this looks like. There's no way to right this wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah. You can try. I mean, the justice system needs to try. And I think, it's almost horrifying to even talk about the fact that they should already set their expectations low in a sense. But, there's a lot going on with juvenile crime. I mean, in Lynnwood, have you guys seen an uptick, a noticeable uptick at all in juvenile crime? Can you articulate that for me?
Absolutely. I can't give you the stats, but I can tell you we have seen an uptick. I can get the stats later on, but what we've seen is an increased level of brazenness. We're seeing more firearms out here. We've had an encounter with our officers recently, an officer-involved shooting where we believe the suspects were juveniles, and we're still working through that case right now. Can't question the juveniles. So, yeah.
What do you think it is, Chief? What do you think is, because we're not talking about like joyriding and things, you know, we all did when we were young. We're talking about serious violent crime. What's going on with kids?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a brokenness. I think we need to get back to common sense approaches of, you know, I recognize that a young man, a juvenile's brain is not fully formed, and they're going to make decisions. There's going to be impulse issues. That doesn't mean we have every teenager out there running around with a firearm in their waistband that is stealing a car and committing robberies, robbing other kids. There are kids that are operating on the outer fringes, and I'm all about intervention. I'm all about redemption, but I think there needs to be a well-defined, probably court-ordered intervention type process. If that's mentorship for them, if that's education, if that's a timeout where we get them to a spot where we can get them away from whatever bad situation they are, but some sort of robust intervention where we can get these kids on the right track before they graduate to actually taking someone's life. Because at that point, it's a completely different spot that we're in now. And we have a lost life, and we have a young person's life who is now changed forever. I think it's okay to have consequences, and it's okay to have consequences for children, and to instill that. I was talking with a friend the other day, and he said, you know, you could tell a third grader, you could ask a third grader, you think it's okay to bring a gun to the mall, and third graders are probably going to say, hey, probably shouldn't bring the gun to the mall. So to give a 16-year-old, let them off the hook with, well, they just don't know any better because their brains aren't fully formed, I think is not going all the way through with where we need to be as a society of, okay, while that might be the case, what can we do to put structures and or systems and or off-ramps in place so that we can equip these young men and young women with a path forward. So how can we harness the energy? How can we harness that recklessness, that dangerous behavior, and get them on a different track? So there is a better path, and there is a great story that we can tell of redemption later on, as opposed to a story that we're now talking about of heartbreak and a lost life that will never come back. So I think I'm hoping that we get back to just like everything right now, of rather than the polarity of it's all this or all that, there's a lot of room in the middle there to figure out a path forward that probably makes sense, that can be a little more nuanced, and we can do better in serving our youth and provide some structure. You know, I coached Little League football and high school football for years, and I can tell you young men crave structure. So
yeah. I'd rather have them have structure on a football field than structure in a jail cell for the rest of their lives. That's for sure. So I just want to end with this because it came up, you know, just after this shooting happened, and it just seems relevant to the issue we're talking about. The Department of Children, Youth, and Families put out a statement saying that they will not be taking any new bookings into either of the juvenile detention facilities in the state until further notice. I guess, is there any sort of trickle down impact of that you can foresee?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that if they're going to one of those two institutions, they're not going there for stealing a 6-pack of beer or going for a joyride in a car. They have graduated to very dangerous behavior where our justice system, especially for juveniles, is extremely reticent to lock kids up, and rightfully so. I mean, to remove them from whatever their environment is and to put them into a secure facility, that's something that has to be weighed heavily and has to be decided upon, not quickly. So with that, though, to say that we're just shutting it off, the people that are graduating to those are engaged in very violent behavior usually. And so I am concerned about the safety implications for our community.
Well, what DCYF says, and they put this bombshell out, you know, a holiday weekend, and then they said, we'll have more details later. And I'm thinking, we need more details now. What my understanding is that these juveniles, if they're, for instance, sentenced or awaiting sentencing, that they would remain in county facilities. I guess, is there a thought that county facilities are okay with that? I mean, you know, what's happening in King and Snohomish counties, are they going to be okay to pick up the burden of that?
I'd have to defer to my peers on that. I know that we have a great relationship with Snohomish County's juvenile detention facility. They're great up there. They're about creating a great environment, a healing environment for these kids. So it might very well be that they can hold that and they can kind of be that holding ground or that purgatory of sorts until they figure out a path moving forward at these longer term facilities. But yeah, the short notice caught us off guard as well. Now, again, for us, we are talking about things that are downstream. We're talking about people that have now gone through a court process and it's fully adjudicated, and now they're at a spot of let's send somebody off to a place so we can have them serve the time that they need to serve. So, downstream, what that looks like. I mean, I think there's further conversations to have. We're very early, like you said. This was just right before the weekend that we heard about all this. So.
Yeah. I mean, I just have at this point, I'm with the public safety stuff being so nonsensical. Sometimes I'm at like these conspiratorial levels where I'm like, they're not going to take new bookings. And so then they're going to give them shorter sentences because they're going to argue that there's no place for them. And so I just like go down this rabbit hole of concerns about it. Chief, anything else you need from the public right now, imminently on Jada's case?
No, I think it's important for people to be thinking deeply and considering all sides on these conversations that really do have a public safety impact for all of our communities. And so, these are complex issues, but I also think there are common sense approaches that we can find to make things better. And I look forward to that. And my only hope, and again, I'm still heartbroken by what happened to Jada. My hope, and I've already started to get some emails from some of our leaders in the area, that maybe this spurs some further conversations about what can we be doing better. And so I remain hopeful. We have a lot of bright people in the justice system. We have a lot of bright people. I don't share the view that there's conspiracies out there. I think sometimes we just have these big systems that are disparate and aren't maybe communicating as well as they should. And so I think as we come together, this could spur some fruitful conversations. And so I just would ask people to be understanding that a lot of these gray complex issues require us all to sit there and think and come together at the table to find solutions rather than being an all this or an all that sort of deal. So people just considering it and considering all sides and thinking critically about the issues is, I guess, what I would ask. As I would ask of my kids.
Thinking is good. We also need action, for sure. Well, beyond the point. You leave the conspiracies to me, okay? I'll handle the conspiracies. All right, Chief. Well, again, I'm so sorry for what's happened up there, and just devastated. I know, how hard that is for law enforcement as well, with kids, particularly, to come on a scene like that, and Jada's family. I mean, it was heartbroken for her. So thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
That is Lynnwood Police Chief Cole Langdon on the shooting at Alderwood Mall that claimed the life of a 13-year-old girl. Jada is just horrifying. So here, a couple things, what I would just say. I am a constitutionalist through and through. You have a constitutional right to bail. We talked about on the show yesterday. I never want to be in a situation where the government can just lock you up before, you've been proven guilty in a court of law. So, the $500,000, I still think it's terribly low considering, the disregard you have to show for human life to fire a gun in a crowded mall. Call me crazy. On the issue of interviewing juvenile offenders, I do agree that there should be special care in interrogating juveniles. You want those interrogations to stand up in court. And that's what the chief is saying is, the court is already the venue to decide whether someone's constitutional rights were violated. So we always want to go about it in a constitutional way. Otherwise, it's not going to be admissible in court. And then what good does it do us? No good at all. And so I also understand, hey, you've got a 14-year-old suspect. Are they going to fully grasp what it means, like the ability to have an attorney and their rights and all of that stuff? So I'm really on the fence about the law that mandates that you have to proactively make sure an attorney is there, that a child can't waive that right. But then when you get into some of these gangbangers, 17 years old, and they're committing very adult crimes and they're taking other people's lives, to me, it's like, you did the adult crime, you're responsible for your actions enough to know, what, that you have the right to have an attorney present. And for instance, in this case, if they're looking for the gun, is there a gun out in the community and we need to find it before someone uses it to hurt someone else, they can't just be like, where's the gun? They got to wait, they got to call an attorney, they got to wait till the attorney comes there. And so there's some issues there, I think, that can be sorted out. And just one other thing I want to say. I agree with the chief that we need to sit down and have adult common sense conversations. But I don't want to keep having the same stupid conversations for 20 years where we all know what the issue is. We all know what we need to do, but we just don't do it. I mean, nobody disagrees that like we need to make sure that we are intervening early on, especially with young men, to keep them on a better path, you know, in school, in work, and all of this stuff. Okay, well, we've been saying that for 20 years, probably longer than that, 50 years. I mean, I can only speak to when I've been alive. And still, well, that's not happening, clearly. You still have young men going into the gang life as opposed to, you know, focusing on school and an education, yet we've been saying the same freaking stuff, no-brainer stuff for years and years and years. So at some point, like, okay, well, are you going to do it or not? And if you're not going to do it, then I guess we just have to throw them in jail. I guess that's it. If you're not going to put meaningful efforts in place to try to get these young people on a better path in life, then I guess we just have to throw them in jail. Because, you know, and you might think, what is a better path, right? There have to be consequences in school. There have to be consequences built in at every stage before they commit a heinous crime like murdering a 13-year-old girl at a mall. And what do we have? We just talked about our education system. They're talking about politics and social issues. If you're not white, they're basically saying, well, the world is meant to hold you down. We've discussed this a million times on the show. Oh, the world is out to get you. You can't do anything with your life. And so then, of course, they're like, well, I'm going to just rob, cheat, and steal my way through life because I've been told by adults and by Jay Inslee and all these people that, you know, the system is designed to hold me down. That nonsense has to end. They have to know that there's a future out there for them if they're willing to work for it. And along the way, when they fall short, there are consequences for falling short. Simple. This is simple stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of it does come down to the quality of their parents. I don't want the government interfering needlessly in the home. You can't force a parent to be a good parent. You just can't. You can't force a parent to be present. You can't force a parent to care where their kids are at midnight. And then that leaves those kids in a situation where they have to make a decision for themselves. What kind of life am I going to lead? And so there's always going to be kids who stray, and then the system has to deal with them after the fact.